Yeah, those two sprouts, that was
No.
big.
So, welcome everybody. Sorry I didn't get to put any notification out for this or not. We're doing a live stream tonight. Out here in sunny, cold, cheese-ridden Wisconsin, and I wanted to do a live stream tonight, but Kevin is in a world of hurt right now. They lost something really important on a rack, and the rack is now down, and he can't get it rolling. And so he's looking for a part. So I called my buddy Greg, who I've known for now about 4 years. He's been working on supermarkets for that long, and just recently he's gotten to dip his toes in the water of the fun world of startup, and
Yeah.
it's found out the trials, the tribulations, and everything kind of interesting on there, and. So I wanted you to talk about that a little bit, and maybe some people have some questions about you know how you got into how you started getting into startup, and what you've learned just in a little bit of time that you've been helping to finish up some of these punch lists.
Yeah. So how I got into startup was just the the whole employee shortage everywhere. There just wasn't enough startup guys. So they asked me, and I've always been interested and curious about it. So I jumped on the opportunity. I think originally I bit off a little bit more than I can chew. I guess I didn't fully understand, and I've read startup manuals and documents and stuff like that, but
Mhm.
it doesn't really prepare you for everything, every little detail. And the two startups I did, I mean, it was ground up. I mean, it was completely ground up, and you know, as far as the EMS, they send you a Blake a program, a base program, but then they have a huge list of what they need programmed. And coming from service, the programming is a lot simpler in service because if I have more than one rack, I can just go to the other controller, see how it's programmed, and duplicate. Well,
And there
here,
And there's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, I still do that to this day. I mean, if I have a roundabout theory of how I think it should be programmed, and I'm like, well, they have another rack. Let me see, so I can see what they're accustomed to. Because what I don't want don't want to happen is basically they come back and say this isn't right. This is not the way that we wanted it. So by you basically cutting out the middleman and programming it like another store that you have been, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
right. And the one of the biggest, sorry, I had to get a phone charger, but um, the main thing that I learned is, I mean, customer spec, because they don't care if you know how to do it or it's worked a different way. You've done it a different way at a different store. They want it the way they want it, and even if it's not right in your eyes or a better way to do it, they absolutely do not care
Hmm.
about any of that. And then after that, it was one of my bigger issues, which I was happy I had you, was just getting the information I needed as far as what the customer spec actually was. Half the time I was for sure blind out there trying to figure out what it is they wanted. All they could really tell me is that it was wrong. They,
That's we can't tell you, and
yeah,
we don't use customer names, but they'll tell you all they will tell you is that it's wrong. They won't give you
yeah,
any guidance like, well, you should know that. You've
exactly.
done enough, but this is the first one I'm doing. Like, just
Yeah,
give me something. So like I said, like sometimes just copying off of whatever another controller that you've done in the past. It helps you out. And then as far as some of the newer programming, I mean, how'd you deal with that?
well, the newer programming, a lot of it was trial and error. It was, I mean, I'm trying this, I'm trying that. The biggest thing that saved me was, I mean, Ultrasight. Having Ultrasight and doing it all through Ultrasight instead of terminal mode.
Hmm.
I mean, it was such a. I listened to your video on actually tapping in through the Ethernet, and so I could just tap into the Ethernet switch, and I had access to the BX controller, the RX, I had everything right on my computer, and even, and then I would, talking to you. I mean, a text only as good as his network, honestly. Having guys to call. I know having a contact at Emerson helped. I had to call Emerson a few times, but for the majority of it, it was honestly trial and error. Try this, try that, try this, and when it worked, it it sunk in for sure. When as soon as you figured it out, it's like, oh, I'm never gonna forget this again.
well,
But
I know one of the things that a lot of guys don't know, and we actually haven't brought it up a lot, is the momentary switch function on the E2 and how it pertains to what we do. So when you have a digital input, there is a push button switch, and there's also a change of state where it's basically a momentary switch, so it's an on off real quick, right? And if you have it programmed when it's just on and then off and not a momentary, and you program it the other way, it just changes state but never changes state ever again. And it does the same thing for the momentary too. Like if you just push it in and let it go right away, it's gonna just not do anything because it's gonna think of it as an error or something. So having that programmed in, and that was one thing I know, like when I first learned the stuff, I struggled because it's like anything else. If you're not using it constantly, and you don't remember some of the stuff constantly, you are gonna forget. But I guarantee that momentary switch stuff, you're never gonna forget from here.
no, and I'm not even ashamed to admit. I mean, that one switch, the refrigeration alarm buzzer, 5 hours, 5 hours. And I had it programmed. I had it on the onboard IO. I mean, I just had this thing. I had the whole wiring memorized, and you know, And luckily, I got a hold of you, and that dude tapped into my computer in what, like 20 seconds. He had it. But yeah, that's something.
Well, that's why I've said before, like on when you're doing refrigeration, and like you usually now you've been doing refrigeration now 4 years. So usually after 5 years, you think you know everything. And that's usually when you start, dipping into these more, programming issues, and where I say, you'll get that call where it'll just throw you on your ass. Startup is one of those things.
Oh yeah.
It's very sink or swim. It's very, high intensity. You got to get this done. And people are looking to you for answers, even if it's stuff like, when's this going to get done? Well, I don't know. I'm not the foreman of the construction crew. I'm gonna have to talk to him. We'll talk to I just don't have time. So like you're constantly being the middleman. Like same thing with the electrical, because you're working. You're also controlling the HVAC and the lighting. So if it's not working, and it's just because it's not fully hooked up, now you have to be like, well, electricians, I need this hooked up, because they're complaining about it, because they all essentially, it comes down to you. I taught a level 6 class not too long ago, and they were asking about startup, and I had said to them, I was like, it's all your fault. And they're like, what is that supposed to mean? I was like, the one thing about startup that you will learn very quickly, that it's all your fault. It does not matter.
Oh yeah. And that's something and a big issue I was having was I was doing 2 stores at the same time. So I couldn't finish one store. I was doing both. So I would get the stores mixed up and the punch list mixed up. One store, the electricians put in, CTs on the power wall for the power monitoring backwards, but it was on me to, fix it. So exactly what you're saying. I mean, it all comes down to the startup tech, and they want it done yesterday, for sure.
BACnet, when programs and boards need firmware update and change configuration ID or BACnet ports. I don't think I understand your question. I don't understand your question, man. I'm sorry. But yeah, I mean, during startup, you do have to, when you're doing it with, case controllers, or what kind of leak detectors do they have on site there at that specific facility?
They had the Emerson, what is it? The leak detection panel for Emerson, with the little probes in each walk-in, stuff like that.
The back rack style one.
Yeah, kind of. And the base program was actually wrong.
Well, I know that store typically uses the MRLDS.
That's exactly, yeah. They use the MRLDS, but they had the, instead of the white little bullet sensors, it was the actual box mounted, and the base program was wrong in there. So I had, that was something else I had to learn. I was flipping through every manual I could find, and
those are programmed via Bluetooth, and there's a magnetic switch that there's supposed to be a 1 that comes with it, but if that's gone, which typically it always is, You bust open the cover, which is a couple Allen wrench screws, and then basically bust that open, and there's a button on the left hand side. Because I literally just went out to a facility and shot a video on this. You know, we were talking about the rack that it was
Mm-hmm.
attached to, but I was like, you know, because I was looking for one. But I mean, they're not cheap. I think
No.
they're like $2,200 or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like I could just get one and shoot a video. So I was like, all right, well, let's do it while I'm on site. You know.
Right. Yeah, and these I found out you had to program them as a linear instead of because I guess the program came as a MRL DS 400. It
Oh,
actually
okay.
it needed to be linear because I mean we were reading 1,000 ppm and alarms are going off everywhere and everything else. So we finally figured that out.
Gotcha. Um, so I mean, I know you learned the real cool thing with TeamViewer. Tell the guys what you're doing
Yes.
so you can look at your computer and not having to be right there.
Yeah. So I downloaded TeamViewer on my cell phone. I hooked up my laptop on UltraSite, tapped into the network, and then tapped into my laptop via TeamViewer on my phone. And so
Hmm.
I was able to walk the store and do my programming, check my temps. I mean, I was able to do everything. So, and I didn't have to go back and forth to the rack. That was a game changer. I mean, especially balancing all the cases and everything. I mean, an absolute game changer.
Because you can still access the controller just like you would.
Hmm.
It's recommended that you maybe use a stylus because you're trying to
Yeah.
operate an ultrasight screen that's what 2.5 by maybe
Yeah.
6. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like having a stylus probably helps with that. But I mean, shit, you can put stuff in defrost. You can see
Yeah.
how the changes are affecting your EPR percentages and your case lineup. You don't
Yeah.
have to.
I ended up I just had UltraSight on my phone. I was able to do everything through UltraSight
That's
on my
awesome.
phone. Yeah.
And it's not any more work than it would normally be, right? I mean.
No, the only thing, if I was to do a lot more of them, I would
Mhm.
end up probably investing in like an iPad or just a bigger screen, you know,
Yeah,
to,
'cause if you have a tablet, same thing. Well, I
hmm
mean, the only thing is you'd have to make sure that would be on the network, in order to do that, because
hmm
that's why you can't do it through your phone. But yeah, you could basically put the tablet on a hotspot, have the phone in your pocket, and just basically have the iPad or whatever, working off of that. So you're not working off I say tiny screen, even though cell
yeah.
phones are freaking huge. But trying to do something like ultrasight can kind of be a trip. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Um,
Um, Yeah, so that was definitely a game changer for me. And then another thing, that I learned was, I mean, scheduling. I mean, schedule, and again, I guess I went into it a little naive. I just didn't think that it was on the startup tech for scheduling. I thought I would have people above me that would do that because I mean, one of the stores stocked. I never told them to stock. I never knew they were stocking. Stocked before I was done balancing the store.
Well, I mean,
So,
in all honesty, you really can't balance a store until it has product in it.
right.
Typically what I'll do is, if something's significant where it's not even pulling down temperature, I'll do some broad strokes as far as adjustment on the expansion valves. But I mean, you're not going to be, right off the bat correct until they actually load that whole damn case.
Right.
And that's when you're learning other shit. Well, something you weren't paying attention to before, but now they have everything loaded in the way that they're going to do. And you're like, well,
Mhm.
you can't have it like that. Well, why?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to work. Well, why? Because the case isn't meant to work. Well, why? I just,
Yeah.
it's talking to my 10-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, why? Because I said
Yeah.
so, that's why.
They would show me the emails that they got from corporate, a picture of this is exactly how it's supposed to be stocked, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I understand you have that. I'm just letting you know you're gonna have significant issues out of this.
So besides the scheduling, what else did you learn while you were getting your feet to the fire?
I as with programming and just I thought I was pretty proficient at programming and everything, but doing these two startups, I mean, a different level. I learned so much. And as far as the one big thing I learned because these two stores that I did, they had a third party commissioning company,
Hmm.
and you have to. I figured out you have to watch them too, because they're, you know, for example, I mean, I'm not going to say any names, but there was a, liquid pressure regulating valve on
Mm-hmm.
this wreck on a loop system,
Mm-hmm.
and they were running 448, and they wanted, 70 degrees midpoint set to it.
Mm-hmm.
It was an AAOE. Well, he kept on hooking up his gauge to the inlet of the valve and saying that it wasn't set right. And I kept on telling him, I'm like, man, this is an outlet pressure regulator. You
Mm-hmm.
got to check on the outlet. He said, and he was arguing with me, and he dinged me on the punch list on it, and
So
he was hooked on the wrong port.
Kevin had and he only noticed it because like every single store that someone was doing that he knew that was doing the commissioning, all the pressures were off by 2.3 psi. Every single one. And
Yeah,
like, and what do I teach you about balance of probability? Like if you have that much stuff that's common, then there's something commonly that's that's causing it. And he's like, why
yeah,
don't you check your pressure transducers to make sure they're right? You know?
yeah. Yeah, so it just made me, it made me realize everyone's human. Everyone, not there's no one that just is no all knowing and just
Yeah.
can go in there. And so, but do if I was to do it over again, I would have, you know, I would have scheduled better. I would have done all my programming last. I would have done all my temp stuff that needed to be done first. But I mean, there was it was so funny because there's just highs and lows the whole time. There's some days, man, I thought that I could fix anything. I was like, man, because everything was just going my way, and I had a list. I was like, oh, I got to do this, this, and this, man, and I was boom, 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 and then there was other days, 5 hours on a silence button. I couldn't, you know what I mean? So there is definitely highs and lows.
That's amazing. And
So
like when you finally do figure it out, and it's sometimes you won't be the one figuring it out. Sometimes you
yeah.
have to phone a friend.
Mhm.
I know Greg called me about the silence button, and I was trying to look it up, and I was like, you know what, I know someone that probably does this at least 3 times a week. And I was like, hey buddy, can you log in this computer and just jot it down real quick? And before Greg even knew it, we're done. you know
Yeah,
because I was
and I will say,
I couldn't remember how to do it. I know I own the document, but like trying to rifle through 150 gigs worth of information sometimes it's kind of tedious. So
yeah.
the reason why I didn't get it out to you. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say that guy with Emerson, because he tapped in my computer and did that silent switch. It was scary how fast he was on Ultrasight. I mean, that dude was. So that's when I was like, and it was good. It was a good humbling experience. A lot of it, the case lights when I called you and Kevin down in Florida, trying to wire up that RO, and I was like, I know ROs, I know RO boards, and I couldn't. I don't. I was so far,
Those in
over my
the,
head.
the inversions will get you every single time.
Oh, I know it, and I was like, why can I not wire this? Finally got it, but just little stuff like that, man. It was a great experience, and I did, I loved it. Um, and I would happily do more.
Mm.
Just how much you end up learning throughout it all, and then able to see the finished product. I mean, you saw it when it was dirt. You saw it when the rat came in. All the way up, and then you see your program, and you're like, man, this is kind of my program, and
Yeah,
you feel good. It definitely makes you feel good about it.
yeah, man. It's I remember one of the first, I think it was the first ground up startup I did was up in Albany, New York, and it was in the wintertime, which I will tell you, going to the bathroom in a porta john when everything is frozen is not cool. Um, up in Albany, it's pretty damn freaking cold up there. But I remember getting just 4 or 5 pallets of CPC equipment, and I remember thinking because like the plan wasn't like I had to make up how everything was going to be laid out. There wasn't plans like on some stores you'll get where it says, okay, this RDP, this remote defrost panel will be right here, and these are all the inputs going to it. No, this didn't have that. So I was just like, all right, well, what do they all require? So I figured out what they all needed as far as cases and temperatures and set points and where it's supposed to be just to lay out the damn thing. And like I said, I remember getting 4 or 5 pallets of CPC stuff, and I'm just sitting there taking inventory and just trying to figure out, looking at the schedule. All right, well, this would make sense to put everything over here. This would make sense to put everything over here. So, and like you said, the whole scheduling aspect, like you don't realize, like, the store is going to tell you when they need that case started up by, right? So, I mean, you're at the leisure of the electricians, the plumbers, you know what I mean? Sometimes, you're not doing your own EMS, like as far as pulling the wire and stuff. So, which is kind of scary too, because I mean, if I'm going to be wiring up everything, I'm going to sure as hell make sure I pull everything, because I have no one to blame for it being messed up
Yeah.
than me. You know what I mean? And like, I'm really OCD about it. So, I'll pull, if I'm free pulling, I'll pull 8 spools of wire at the same time. The only difference that I do is I tape every single end at the reel and at the end with what color wire or what color tape that I'm going to do. So like, I was doing EPRs in purple, I was doing defrost termination sensors in orange, regular discharge air in green, product temperature sensors in one color. You know what I mean? So then I would figure out, what each wire is going to be there, and then I'd mark it with that case on that wire. And I pulled that whole damn store, and this was 4 racks, and I don't think I had but 2 connections that I messed up that whole damn store. And it was because I basically put in the work before pulling it. So you're able to plan it out a little bit easier. So, I mean, because if you plan up one section of it, right, of making sure you're pulling the right damn wires, how many hours is that going to save you? Later on down the line, when you're like, shit, 2 of the EPRs are backwards and I can't tell which ones they are. You know what I mean? And
That
yeah,
exact thing.
yeah. What, that happened?
The exact thing happened to me. So I didn't pull anything, and the way they had it set up was the electricians were running the jet lines, and then EMS was going to pull wire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had 2 EPRs cross, and I mean, it took me forever because they were on opposite ends of the store. They weren't even close to each other, and I was just, I mean, they landed on the same board, but I'm just like, how does that happen? And then it's just, it really makes you realize that just everyone's going to make mistakes. So the more you can do yourself, and that exactly what happened, the easier. Because some of the times I was chasing my tail. I had an EPR not working, period, and I'm like, man, this thing, what is going on? And it ended up it was disconnected in the junction box, and per the plans, they wanted solid wire. They didn't want any breaks in the wire all the way to.
It's
And
impossible.
so I know, and that was another thing that I learned. Like, you have to really learn how to read plans quick, because they are they don't care what you say. Is it in the plans or is it not? And again, I said I was doing 2 sort of the same time, 2 different sets of plans, and I mean, my brain was getting all scrambled. But and then I ran across another EPR that
Mm-hmm.
they didn't wrap the valve when they burned it in, and so it was just melted. The piston was melted. So the more the more you can do by with either you or your crew, the better off it's gonna be.
You find manufacturers issues too. Like we had when sometimes when a rack comes in from a manufacturer, they'll put a base program in there for where they think that it was supposed, all the EPRs and stuff were supposed to be. Um, and then if typically if you change that program, it holds the change. Man, I don't know what the hell happened. But so we found 2 EPRs that were switched. I was like, cool. All right, found it once, changed it. 4 days later, it like I didn't before I realized it was going to be a pattern. It did it again, but I didn't notice that the other one wasn't working until later. I was like, well, that's weird. This EPR isn't working now again. I wonder if I went back and yeah, sure as shit. As soon as I closed the other one, that one closed, and I'm like, and I did this twice, and then it happened again. I'm like, no freaking way. So I had to call Emerson, and I was like, what do you guys do for this? He's like, you know what? Just delete the circuit controller program for each one of those and reinstall it back up, because unless you want to wipe the controller or whatever, it just, that's probably going to be the easiest approach. And like, I didn't think that could happen. I don't think in service, I don't think I've ever had that happen where I changed the program and it miraculously changed back, unless it has something like a Cinderella license, like some of the big box blue stores. You know what I mean? Where you
Right.
you can make a change in there, but by midnight that night it'll change back, right?
Right. Yeah. That that exact same thing has happened to me. And it's wild. And during the startup on one, the RTUs,
Mm-hmm.
they're using Prodigy boards, and I mean the the BX controller had the Prodigy license in there. I mean, easy peasy. It hooks straight up, and the temps. If you graph the temps, I mean, it's just a flat line. They're not. And I was just racking my brain. I was going through everything. I just don't know why this isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always like, all my guys, like anybody that's ever called me for tech support or whatever, I'm always like, don't just reset the E2. Like, there's a reason it's doing this, and da 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 da. And I was like, you know what? It's not gonna work, but I'll try it. And it worked. I mean, sometimes just resetting that E2, those temps started fluctuating and actually reading properly. And I was like, what I've always said, there's a reason, But yeah, just resetting the E2 worked on that one.
So that they did that on the. So I'm up in Wisconsin. So I was trying to leave DFW. I think my flight was supposed to leave at like 9:15. I don't think we ended up taking off until I think it was damn near close to noon. And at one point they actually said this on the loudspeaker. The some part of the plane isn't working. We're gonna go by the terminal again, right by the gate, and we're gonna try to reset something and see if it works then.
Yeah, reset and bounce.
Dude, I am really glad they put us on another plane, like regardless of the 2 hour, holdover or whatever that I was there on the tarmac or whatever. But I can only envision the guy like, well, that turbo ain't turning on. We might as well reset it and see what happened.
We'll see if she holds. Yeah.
Who's got the flex seal and the duct tape? We'll get this thing fixed.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Any of you guys in the comments, whether it be Facebook or YouTube, any of you guys have done a startup in the past? Any problems that you guys have had? So what other things have you learned? Other than the fact, like you do get the 5-year itch and where you think you know everything and then you get put on your ass. How many times did you get humbled over this whole entire job?
Oh, I mean, more times than I even care to count. I remember texting you saying, "Hey, I'm currently getting humbled. If you're available." It's just because you go into it, and I wasn't cocky at all, but I do decent at service, and so I go into it thinking, okay, well, I know supermarkets, I know E2. It's not like it's some control I don't ever work with,
It's in my
but
wheelhouse. This is what I'm
yeah,
accustomed to. This is what I'm used
exactly.
to.
But I got in there first day, and I'm like, oh, I've never done any of this. I've never done any of this with an E2, and so yeah, it was definitely way different than I expected. But by the end of it all, it was just, man, like, I'm glad that happened. I feel so good. But something, you know, like you said with manufacturers, I mean, we had a manufacturer issue that was ridiculous. And anytime there's an issue, I mean, it goes up the ladder very quick. I mean, next thing you know, the kids of the owner know about the problem.
Well, they're trying to figure out at that point, like, really who's going to pay for it. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
because what's going to happen. So anytime there's something outside the scope that you're doing that's not involved with the startup, or something's not on the prints but it was supposed to be there, it's considered a change order, and that's how a lot of contractors make some extra money, because a lot of these construction jobs are bid slim margin. So they're trying to do whatever they can. So I'm not going to work on something that I wasn't intended for. I deserve to be paid for that. Manufacturers' wiring on cases has just been atrocious, from my understanding here late.
Yes.
And then on top of it, so like you'll look up some of these cases, and I'm working on a case that has an S3C. Well, in their IOM manuals, they don't have one schematic that actually covers the S3C, and you kind of need to know how it's going to work together. because the way it is currently hooked up, it's not allowing the pan heater to come on. So, I mean, I could rewire it, make, MacGyver the shit to make it work the way it was intended, but it's going to change either A, the programming that's in there, which no one wants you to change, or it's going to have you change the wiring. So what do you do at that point? Do you allow the cases to exuberantly get iced up? I mean, you got to remember that, they don't really, some companies, they do 1% of the total job amount for the warranty. Some people do 10%, you know what I mean? So once again, warranty stuff, are we going to keep letting it fail until we get an answer, or should we just do something to not make it fail, and then worry about getting paid on the back end for the for the wiring issue? Like, what do you do?
Right.
And that's why, besides the parts shortage, I mean, this is another reason why, companies have a hard time making money on construction. And no one talks about it, unfortunately, so it perpetually just gets worse. Right.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so you are correct though. Like, as soon as you send out one email, everyone wants to know why that case isn't running. So, I mean, that's why it gets bumped up so quick. Right.
Oh yeah. And then everything, like you said, it seemed like everything was a change order and everything was a different trade's fault. The electricians are telling it's me, and we had an issue with, the electricians. So in our contract, we didn't hook up any high voltage, whether it be defrost heaters or whatever. We didn't hook up any. And so they hooked it up, and then they got dinged on the commission for amperage unbalance.
Okay.
And so then they tried to wire it up again, and they just couldn't figure it out. They couldn't figure out how to write it up. And then so then they're emailing, somehow they get a hold of the manufacturer engineering, and they don't know what they're wiring up. They have no clue what they're wiring up. They just know that they're wiring it up and the amperages are not balanced. So the manufacturer taps into the plans of the store, sees the case. Well, they look at the wrong case. And so there was a return heater and a coil heater that were both 208. Well, they called that return heater a drain heater.
Oh, shit.
The drain heater was 120.
So they hooked up the wrong voltages, the wrong heaters, and that's where they weren't getting.
And then after they wired it up that way, the way manufacturers told them to wire it up, they started popping breakers. And then they lost product because they stocked, and no one knew they were stocking. And so I ended up I went with the electricity. I got underneath that case and I drew it out like A, B, C, A, B, C. And, showed them how to do it. And, finally they got it done. But I mean, that was a fiasco. And the electricians are blaming me, and everything the electricians did was a change order. And then, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. My defrost just isn't working. That's all I'm here for. So yeah, I definitely learned that. And the sad thing is that it is like that because the margins are so small, and these supermarkets want the cheapest they can do, and all us in the industry, all different companies. It just seems like we're underbidding, and I think quality suffers because of that.
Absolutely. Did you get to use your vacuum header that you made up for that?
Yes, that was cool. That was really cool.
How
It worked better.
Yeah, how fast were you able to pull the vacuums comparative to doing when you have a rack that's just flat versus pulling this down? How fast did you get it down?
I mean, we got it down. 3 hours was like our first go around. And change of oil.
Yeah.
But I would say about like 8 hours we were holding.
And you were only using what you like, because you were using an Appion?
Appion.
Or what vacuum pump were you using?
No, I was using a Yellow Jacket. I was using my
So
little
you're
Yellow
using
Jacket.
a regular 8 CFM.
8 CFM pump, yeah, with that, but it just went into that. It went into that 1.3" header where I had all those different. I had what, 1/2 inch, 2 3/8, and 4/4. And I hooked the 3/8 and a quarter up to the pump, and then all the other hoses I hooked up to the rack, and of course, like no manifold, no cores, no nothing, just straight flow, no restrictions, and just let it ride. Like I said, we would end up changing the oil a few times, but yeah, I mean, I was extremely impressed. I was like, wow. So now, after listening to y'all's podcast and stuff, now I'm like, man, I wonder if I use that manifold and some True Blue hoses and
Oh yeah,
everything
no,
else.
for sure. So I mean, if you had a bigger vacuum pump as far as bigger CFM, that would have worked a hell of a lot better too.
Yeah,
I didn't realize, that was new to me when I was listening to when Kevin and I were having the conversation about, going to like Harbor Freight and getting an air compressor header and just, putting, you could actually buy the threaded, 90-degree angle service valves, that are on the rack
yeah,
and
yeah.
actually thread it right into that. You know what I
Oh, I
mean?
know. That was a great idea. I was like, dang. Because it took me like a couple hours to build my manifold. I was like, man, I could have just bought one for cheap.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was very impressed by that thing. I
That's
didn't think it was
awesome.
going to work that good. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't think the screw on the broken trader wasn't going to work either, though.
Yeah, I still have one drywall screw in my tool bag because of that. I carry
So,
that.
Greg and I were working together, and I was showing him about, you could pull the Schrader core and actually, stick a piece of Silfoss in the rack and see if you have filter dryers in there. Sometimes it's hard to tell, and when I was doing it, I broke the Schrader right off the bottom section, just stuck in there. So I put the cap back on, got the rack back up and running, and then we went downstairs. He's like, "What are you looking for?" I'm like, "I'm looking for a drywall screw." He's like, "For what?" I was like, "I'm gonna get that piece out. We shouldn't have to mess with it. All we should be able to just stick it in there, and I should be able to pull it out." And he didn't tell me, but he's like, there's no freaking way that's gonna work. So we went back upstairs to the rack house, and literally, 10 seconds I had the thing pulled out. We've had the Schrader core remover back on there, and put the new Schrader in. We were all straight. I told you, man, it comes in handy just having one random sheet wall screw in your freaking toolkit.
Yeah, there was 0% of me that believed that was going to work when you did it. And I was silently freaking out because I was like, we're going to be here all night. How are we going to fix this? And I was running through every scenario in my head. Okay, we'll pump it down. We'll do this, we'll do that. We'll sweat out that whole port,
Well,
or we
no,
might
it
have
was
to.
it was on the filter dryers.
I was like, we're
It
going to have
was
to change
no,
out the whole.
we could have unscrewed it.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, I was freaking out at the time. I was like, we're wasting time trying to find a freaking drywall screw when we need to get this port out and put a new one in.
Yeah. I told you I'm lazy, and that's the only reason why I read all this shit. That's the only reason why.
Yeah.
Communication stuff. What stuff in communication did you learn while you're doing that?
Um. Well, so definitely learned like schematics, like on the comms and stuff.
Mhm.
Read because some of it switches polarity on one end to the other. Some doesn't.
Mhm.
Stuff like that. And then uh, that was like a huge one, especially with the power dent, the power monitor. I
Mhm.
mean, it reverses phasing on the back net, and I had one. I ended up having to troubleshoot because, like I said, I was in two stores at the same time. Well, I came back to one of the stores I was at, and they already had it hooked up, but it kept on failing in comm loss.
Mhm.
Well, they ended up having it on the wrong port, and the port wasn't set up for backnet; it was set up for IONet. And so going through that and like having to like figuring out, okay, this Alt T on the E2, go to see where you're at and see what COM port's what,
Mhm.
and just figuring out, oh well, they don't have it on COM6. Hey, what is COM6? Oh, COM6 is set up for IONet, not backnet. This is a backnet device. I need to switch polarity. So it's just stuff like that. I mean, it was just it helps when you read when you read stuff for sure. But yeah, that was really cool. And one big thing I learned is if like Emerson's monitoring
Yeah.
the store,
Yeah.
well, they actually put it in like a suppression. Well, someone needs to let Emerson know that it's stopped, because if you don't, it's still going to be in suppression. And
Hmm.
so when things alarm, Emerson's not going to send out a company to fix the problem, and then you're going to throw away product.
Is there any? See, I've never asked this question. Did you find out if there's any way to see if it's what'd you call it, submission,
Suppression.
suppression, or is my mind suppression? Wait, is there any way in the E2 to see if if it's in suppression?
So not that I know of, because it's still alarmed on the E2 on the control.
Okay,
But
so
the
it's some,
monitoring company, it's something with the monitoring company, and they
yeah.
wouldn't, so they just wouldn't submit the alarm to the store. Like, so how this store operated, it was like the E2 would alarm, it would send the alarm to the monitoring company. The monitoring company would then call the store manager, and then the
Okay,
store manager would facilitate, you know, a, a contractor to come out or not.
gotcha.
And the store manager was never getting any phone call. So,
Anything else you want to bring up before we wrap this thing up?
man, no, like I said, I had a blast, and thank you, of course, for always being there and answering your phone and everything else. Especially, I know I probably called you a little flustered a few times, and you kept it cool, calm, and collected, and we got it taken care of. So yeah, I appreciate you.
No, no problem. Sometimes like just being able to take a step back, and I'm finding that now with my new gig and what I'm doing. Like, I was having a breakdown. Like, I'm like, I don't know why I'm so flustered. Like, someone called me and they were like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "Not really." He's like, "Just get up, walk away, smoke a cigarette, and then come back. Give yourself 15 minutes and just walk away." And I called him after. I was like, "Dude, thank you." Like, I never let myself get like that, but like, I don't know what happened. And he's like, when you get that bad, you just need to get up and walk away. And that goes with anything, because
Hmm.
I mean, doing a startup, you're dealing with so many different things and so many different people, and it can be really overwhelming at times. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 100%. And that was something that I did that a lot. I mean, there's sometimes I just need to breathe, take a step back, go take a break, and then come back, because you get so far into the weeds that, I mean, you can't see the forest through the trees. You know what I mean?
And
So
you feel like you've exhausted everything. Like I do remember, now you're telling me that you spent 5 hours on it. I remember talking to you that day that that you were doing the silence button, and like Greg, Greg, when he gets flustered, it's one continuous sentence, even though it's like a paragraph. He's just blah blah blah, blah and this and I'm like, slow down, take a breath,
yeah,
and it's just we all get like that sometimes, you know what I mean? But like it's cool that that you're so young, and that you're able to actually start doing some of these things to better yourself, because I mean, I'm sure doing these two startups has helped your career, right? I mean,
oh,
what have you
tremendously.
what have you walked away with that you can take us out on, that basically this is the reason why it made me such a better tech? Is it the humbling experience that you experienced of stuff that you didn't know how to fix? What was it?
Yeah, it was definitely that. It was the ability to not know something, but being able to think critically about it. Like,
Hmm.
how I know how this is supposed to work, so what is it not doing? You know what I mean? And that just, I guess, maybe getting enough confidence in myself to realize you can do, you can walk on. So now, like, now I'm back in service, and I go to service calls, and it's just like, okay, like, let's take this one step at a time. Let's keep it simple. And, if I don't know it, I can figure it out, or I can use my network. I'm not, it's going to be answered. But with that momentary switch, the reason I was freaking out about it is because it wouldn't silence. The alarm was just blaring throughout the whole store, and this store puts the alarm on the sales floor. It's on the sales floor, and the employees are pushing the button. They're putting tape over it, and it's just like wow, wow. So I call you. I'm like, dude, what do I do?
Cut the wire, cut the red wire.
I did. Oh, I pulled it, and I was like, I don't know. And but then I had to test it. So I was like, I got to hook this wire back up to test it. And then every time I'd hook it back up, it'd start blaring again. The employees are like, dude, what are you doing, man?
You just
And
had
yeah,
silence, man. What
yeah,
the hell?
exactly. So yeah, that was definitely why I was freaking out. But yeah, no, walking away, just everything I learned, and just the ability to, or I guess the reassurance to know that I can walk into something not knowing anything about it, and I can come away with something, maybe, more than likely figure it out. So yeah, that was the biggest thing that's really helped me with my career.
Any advice to anyone that's looking into getting into startup that might be a nugget of wisdom that you can bestow on them?
Learn plans for sure, and just don't tell them no. Tell them, I hate to say it, but tell them you can do it. Because you'll figure it out, or have a network of guys that you can call and and stuff like that. Because they asked me, and I was like, yeah, yeah, I don't see why not. I've never done it in my life, so just being able just to kind of get out of your comfort zone a little bit, just be open to doing that, and I think you'll figure out that a lot more. You're capable of a lot more than you think.
Well, Greg, I appreciate you coming on, man. It
Yes,
means a
sir.
lot. I figured people might benefit from listening to your story and realizing what it might take in order to get into startups. So I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, no worries, man. Hey, and thanks for being my mentor, dude.
All right, bro.
You've helped me out tremendously. So have a good
No,
one.
not a problem, man. Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.